Welcome everybody to VTech's third webinar series. Today we are talking about the impact of COVID-19 and the situation on network and data security here in the future. Today we have Mr. William Rankin with us and also Mr. James Perrin Courtney.
Hello, name's William Rankin. I've been in security doing analyst work and engineering the past 12 years. I've worked across verticals from investment banking to pharmaceutical, defense, and just had a broad range of experience. And from endpoint to cloud at this point. So from an architectural standpoint through an operational standpoint, I have a fair amount of experience.
Thank you, William. And then also we have Mr. James Courtney with us today.
Good morning, everyone. Name's James Courtney. Roughly bringing 17 years of experience in cybersecurity, specializing in compliance, governance, risk management, data privacy, and overall cybersecurity for federal government, as well as state, local, and big Fortune 500 companies.
Wonderful. And I just want to take a minute just to thank both of you very much for joining us today, and also to the audience. Thank you very much for plugging in to this webinar series with VTech, and we hope that we bring you value and critical information in the marketplace so it can help better understand and make smarter decisions as we're going through this pandemic. Okay, so I'd like to open up the floor. Will, I'd like to ask you, the first question and get your thoughts on this. What do you feel the importance of data, network, and endpoint security is, due to the surge of what we're seeing, the more trend of working from home?
Sure. First to data. We put our controls traditionally in place based on the fact that we're protecting some sort of edge. And because now we have a blurring of that line, it's not clearly delineated, we have to either migrate the controls or change our mindset into, okay, maybe we don't have the ability to place the same level of control on some of these endpoints. From a network perspective, I believe you want to architect the same way. You want to train people and operationalize the same manner, but you have to recognize the difference between a person working in the office and being outside of the office. Because our network controls have traditionally been, protecting an enterprise, now we need to migrate and shift kind of our controls and our visibility to the endpoint. And you look at our users and train them even differently, because normally, say they were going to browse the web, we'd have our proxy in place and they can't go XYZ place, or we'd have visibility into where they went, where the machine is communicating. Now we need to be able to either one, shift to open DNS or some different types of web proxy services to control where they're browsing, or even be able to monitor their potential communications. It's a shift in perspective, but you still need, you still want the awareness, so you want to build towards it. You want to operationalize as if you did have control over, well, I'm sorry. You need to recognize, do you have control over the endpoint? Are you using a corporate machine? I mean, there's companies that were just totally taken blind by this, didn't have it built. So I guess it depends, on your current approach to work at home. I did not answer that well, but endpoint security specifically, I would like, and I think most people recommend, building your controls around still being able to, detect on endpoint wherever it is at, whether it's in the office or not, being able to remediate, patch, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. We hear so much about the old parameters and what does that really mean anymore? You know what I mean? That dynamic has changed significantly.
Yeah, we would put certain controls. I mean, you knew where your data center was, you knew where your workers would all be while they're accessing certain data. And again, also it depends on type of data we're talking about and the type of organization. But traditional organizations would have very limited work from home. And there's some organizations like my current organization where I would say more than half of the people work from home. So that organization has very different challenges. I'll take it from the perspective of a company that, had to do a big shift and lift when this occurred. Quickly, can you enable two-factor? Can you, are you allowing people to use their own devices? I mean, data security when someone's using a corporate device is one thing because you can put controls around it. But when somebody's using a personal device, legal changes, compliance changes. I mean, you might not be compliant with your vendors for any type of. So it's been a big shift for a lot of companies. It just depends on, again, what your previous perspective was and, how you were staffed to do that. It's also resourced, right? Like as soon as this occurred, people were ordering laptops left and right. So it took weeks for some people to get this. What if you still needed work done? So trying to find a secure solution, still enabling your business to make money, obviously, has been a challenge for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Thank you so much, James. And that's a great segue into this next question. I wanted to ask you, sir. What do you feel, and what do you see some of the projected security trends, in the marketplace moving forward?
Yeah, that's a really good follow-up question. Thanks for asking. And you touched on some good points, Will, and thinking about the perimeter security for a lot of these organizations, especially dealing with federal government. You're starting to see that perimeter security is going to come more to the forefront now because you're worried about so many machines and so many devices now being outside of your normal perimeter and how to secure and manage those devices. In addition to that, you're seeing some trends in how you onboard somebody now during this pandemic, because there's still organizations that are hiring the workforce and they're needing to onboard these people. Well, think about an organization such as Homeland Security or CISA, who are normally their workforces are always on site and have very little remote access. Now you're having to build out a machine for an individual, send that machine out to them, and for them to get access on that machine on your VPN in some way, shape, or form in a secure method, and getting the information to them that they're going to need to log in and utilize that machine. So some companies are having to change their entire onboarding process to accommodate for that, because you would typically have somebody on site to be able to help that individual, or in case where you have somebody that's been working from home now for 60 plus days and they're having some type of challenges with their machine. How does your help desk now help to remediate those challenges for those different machines, and how do they address the concerns to keep operations going for those individuals now that they're not readily accessible to be able to service those machines or give viable replacements? So you're also affecting the inventory now and the overall logistics of your IT department. How you ran it before COVID-19 is not going to work for the same reasons that you have to change it now because of COVID-19. So you're going to see a lot of companies starting to focus on that, especially if you're dealing one-to-one on a prime contract with federal government, or if you're just dealing with, data privacy or healthcare industry, because you now have a greater concern and a greater risk that's facing your data that's moving throughout the internet now. So those are some of the same things that I'm noticing in the consulting world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great point. I talk to a lot of federal agencies on a regular basis, and not to name any names, but there's a lot of folks that were not prepared for this, right? I mean, they were just, even in the March timeframe, they were just testing some of these things that you're discussing. Right. So yeah, no, that's a great point. Thank you so much. And well, that brings me to my next question. Knowing your background, what does that mean for the hacking world? Good or bad? How do you see that playing forward?
Sure. I think that, I always try to make, a threat-based approach to whatever I'm trying to do. So I try to stay abreast with what the attackers are doing and how they do it. The attackers are very much aware that workers are going to be distracted by the fact that there's children around. So there's going to be that many more phishing attacks. They know that in all likelihood, your device is connecting from a much less protected network at your home. So attacks of that nature are going to be occurring. But they know. Is bottom line. And so because they know this, they also know that there's, it kind of goes back to the last question, you know, what do we have to do trend-wise? We have to make sure that we could patch and we could do incident response and we can do help desk from a remote session, but all those connections, every application you put on that machine is a potential vector for an attacker to get onto a machine. So again, they know this. They know that you probably don't segment your network at home and put IoT devices over here and put something else, or you don't, you know, change your default router passwords. These people know how the average person works and operates when it comes to passwords. And right now, you are more vulnerable than you would be from connecting in your office. I mean, there's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Split tunneling, any types of the architecture that allows you to work from home puts your machine at a different risk. And if you haven't built your controls around still being able to make the same detections and response and remediations, then, I mean, they just know. I mean, they're talking about it on the web very clearly. You can see the trends are going up when it comes to attacks, when it comes to phishing, because, I mean, they're very aware that, you know, I'm working and half the time I have a kid in a meeting beside me. Me personally, maybe not, but a person would be more likely to click on a link that looked, you know, potentially suspicious, open an attachment. So they're going to try this. They have been doing that historically, you know, over the Super Bowl, over Valentine's Day, over any type of incidents like this. And this is a sustained period where your users are going to be distracted and, you know, potentially just a lower hanging fruit than they would normally be. And like I said, they're very aware of, you know, the social aspects of, you know, the challenges of working with COVID.
Yeah, no, and that's great. And let me say first to the audience, you know, having both James and Will here, and you guys can see their insight and their depth of knowledge. Please use the Q&A section, you know, to ask them questions as we get towards the end of this conversation as well. Because I'm sure you guys are going to have some questions for these guys too. Will, let me ask you this too, because a lot of folks, you know, and I am very much one of them that work from home and we have distractions and et cetera. You know, I am one often too, if I have to check my bank account or if I have to, you know, go into a separate email platform or something, I may do that quickly from my work computer. You know, moving forward, how important is it to separate you know, work from home in that regard?
It's very important. I don't think you can minimize that threat. Every action you take on a machine, obviously, is a potential threat. It's a vector for someone to attack you. I think you need to be diligent. I think that it's reasonable for a person to, it depends. Again, I hate answering questions definitively for this exact reason. You could be working for an organization where that's absolutely prohibited and you can't do that. And then the architecture should lock it down and not allow you to do it. You could be working for a place that says, okay, you can use it for a minimum amount of time as long as it's on your personal time. But now, again, being on your home network, just the fact that, you know, your kid's device is the one that could be compromised, you know, that's a way to get into your network. And so me personally, you know, I go overboard. You know, I would have my team, you know, segment your wireless network. I don't use my device for personal reasons. If I do, I go into a virtualized machine to do it. I know I'm paranoid. I get paid to be paranoid. I would recommend people do all these things to change their default passwords on their routers, on their IoT devices. Because I think they're best practice whether you're working from home or not. But when I know that you have a device that's on my network, and I call it my network because it's, you know, my network I'm responsible for securing, you know, I want you to behave the same way you would in the office. And, you know, when I build my network, I don't let you put whatever you want on my network. Now, all of a sudden, again, our lines are blurring. And yes, we have a VPN, and that is a layer of protection, and that's what I do want. But host compromise could be just to get credentials, you know, and they wouldn't have to compromise necessarily everything on the device. So yeah, I think it comes down to education at that point. You really need to train, especially your high risk individuals, you know, the targets that people do look for. how to better protect themselves when they're off network. You should do it for your entire organization, but also, like I said, set up controls around, your high risk assets, and those are people and systems.
That's right. That's right. I mean, that's great. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I think the concern, for people too moving forward is, you hear about, something as silly as a baby monitor being hacked, or, but those are real impacts that are happening, right? I mean, those are things
Absolutely.
that are affecting people's daily lives.
And I mean, and to know again that your target is in all likelihood at a home somewhere, and in all likelihood there is something on that network. Again, it's how can I get to you, right? And the easiest way is email. The easiest way is compromising a device. So I can go and hopefully you click on it, go to my compromised website I set up for you, social media. It doesn't have to be an email, but I think it really turns into, for my dollar, I send out more educational materials. It might be boring to my users, but it has to be part of it. I look at my EDR controls. I look at how can I do this? I do my practice runs, right? I do my tabletops. What will we do right now if something were to occur, to make sure I'm ready if it does occur? Again, that's what I'm paid to do, and that I'm supposed to be extra paranoid, and I'd rather be, that's preparedness, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you so much. James, let me ask you this. Again, you had talked earlier in this conversation about government agencies and what you're seeing in the consulting world. How prepared are government agencies to manage this shift, over to the work from home type situation?
Well, that's another really good question. It's going to depend on the agency. Everybody was pretty much caught off guard with this and didn't expect it to affect us the way that it's doing right now in the workforce. So one of the things that I applaud a lot of the senior level government agencies for, as you mentioned earlier, is doing those trial runs where they set up a trial basis for a week or two to see what their capabilities were with regards to remote access, to see if the functionality is the same, to see if they can handle the bandwidth, and to see what type of challenges they would face. And those agencies that did that were very successful in transitioning over, versus some agencies did not go that route and just tried to go ahead and almost flip a switch. And as you know, if you plan for something, if you don't plan to fail or have some challenges along the way, you're probably going to fail the whole thing. So we had companies that were delayed in trying to make that transition because they weren't prepared. So what we're going to see is, again, those trends that I spoke about earlier. You're going to start to see agencies spending a lot more money in security awareness training to make those employees that are essential, still working remote, more aware and of the things that they're susceptible to while they're working. Like Will touched on with regards to your network segmentation, VPN access, all the things that you can do from home to try and minimize your footprint and the risk that the government agency and yourself are going to face. Because now you're talking about a network that has potentially a government laptop on it, or your corporate laptop on it, your personal laptop or computer on it, one of your children's gaming devices on it, a couple TVs on it, and any one of those things could be compromised getting access to the others. So you're going to see a huge spend on security awareness. You're going to see a huge spend on perimeter security devices and making sure that you have that infrastructure in place and that architecture to be able to now handle the bandwidth that's going across your perimeter traffic back and forth, because now you have more ports being open inside and outside of your network that need to have that access as if they're sitting at their desk, basically. So you have to take that into consideration. So you're going to see government agencies start to ramp up in these areas and these type of spending and bringing on more network security personnel, more firewall administrators, and people that specialize without having to have training to be brought up to speed in these areas so they can hit the ground running. Because the next situation, unfortunately, as much as we're trying to get prepared for this and the agencies are trying to get prepared for this, the hackers are the ones that are at the advantage of because of this, because they're able to use what they were doing before on a more advanced scale now because they have more targets. So if you take an average size company who may have had 15% of their workforce remote, that's a pretty small target for a hacker to try and deal with. Now you have a company that is 95% remote. You just increase their whole surface area of attacks that they can go after, the personnel that they can go after. So where before they didn't consider, the person that is not in finance as a potential target, now everyone's a target because you can link me to that finance person now that I need to get a hold of to be able to gain their current credentials and access that. So it's changing the dynamics of what we consider our network to be, because now it's truly a wide area network that can span across the globe depending on what agency you're working for. So you're not localized anymore, and you can't handle security and you can't handle your network and your perimeter as a local network anymore because you just increased the surface area. So you'll see the shift in the government personnel and the hiring, the RFPs that come out and the things that they focus on. Even disaster recovery and business continuity planning is going to get an uptick, because if they weren't prepared for it before, this was a great opportunity of an example of disaster recovery or business continuity, and they'll know what their failure points are now to be able to shore those up for the next big thing. So now that we're already in this, we're not trying to manage this anymore. We're actually trying to look and plan for what could happen after this.
That's right. And let me ask you this a little bit, and I'm going to kind of turn the question a little bit on you, and I'd love to hear your insights on this. So there were some folks that were kind of ahead of this thing, right? So you saw a few years ago where Yahoo went to a work from home policy, right? And then you had other companies like IBM that said, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, that said no more work from home policy, right? They wanted everybody in the office. Do you see, and the reason I'm asking too is because I think it'll have a critical impact on the other small businesses that corporations affect, right? The lunches and the dinners and the networking events and all of those things. Do you see a middle ground, or do you think it's going to be one or the other?
So what I think you're going to see first is going to be a trend in hybridization as far as having remote access, cloud access. So you're going to see where companies have a hybrid approach where, they're going to still maintain a data center, and it's going to be a minimum to a small presence data center, but you're going to also see them start investing in cloud infrastructure so that they can make those transitions. Because if you had an organization who was primarily on-site premise focused before this, it was very difficult for them to scale up, to be able to handle the bandwidth, to be able to accommodate their employees the way that they would if they were on-site, versus companies that had a huge presence in cloud-based were easily able to scale up their business to be able to meet the needs of the business, and probably suffered no lag because most of their infrastructure was already cloud-based. So most of their security controls and architecture was already based around that anyway. It was just a matter of noticing that your laptops or your devices were going to be in a different location than they were before. So they didn't really have too much of a change. Like, I've worked for companies before where the majority model of the company was remote, and you were only on site for necessary meetings or something that was tangible that you had to come in the office for. Those companies didn't suffer any type of lag during this time unless they had a commodity-based organization. If you to go to the opposite end of that, the companies that were like IBM primarily on site, I'm sure it was a logistical nightmare to try and switch that over to remote overnight, and then trying to accommodate and handle that huge presence all at one time, because you didn't have the luxury of gradually phasing it in anymore. So they're going to have to plan that out now as a part of your normal strategy, because this is no more an if possibility, it's a when possibility, because now we've already seen the tangible evidence of it happening.
That's right. That's right. And Will, before I go to the Q&A, I'm going to ask you one thing real fast. What should be their sense of urgency in terms of if they haven't already, put some of these protocols and these things in place, what should be the sense of urgency from these organizations moving forward?
Well, absolutely. I think to speak to James' point, yesterday, right? If you don't have the ability to allow your people to work securely remote, you're going to be losing money as soon as that occurs, and you're putting your organization at risk. It has to be part of your disaster recovery response type of planning at this point. I think as part of everything you operationalize you have to ask yourself, how can you ramp up? How can we scale this up if we need to shift people remote? There's certain types of, think about, we're building a car that you can't do remotely, but if it's something that you can shift, you need to go, you need to test it. You need to make sure, again, it can scale if the demand shifts rapidly. Zoom, is a great example of a company that, amazingly shifted. I forget how many users they had before COVID, but then it went up like 10,000% or 100,000% or something like that. And then they had people discovered all these security vulnerabilities, and then they fixed them in like a week. Like, that was amazing. Like, I don't think people really get like how incredible what they just did was. It just, I don't know, won't go there. But every company needs to look at how we do business and then say, how can we do it better? How can we do it remotely if we had to? It doesn't have to be a cultural shift if that's not the company's appetite, if that's not what they can do from a compliance standpoint. But if there is a need, if something necessitates that, how can you do this? And then, as James mentioned, shifting to cloud. Okay, do we do VPN, or do we go to a Citrix kind of AWS workspace style thing where you go into a secure connection via your web browser and I can put some different controls on you? Investigate new solutions to work from, as people used to say, home, but I think it's more like work from anywhere. If you're in the beach, I still need you to be working. And if my organization can deal with that risk, then how can I do it securely? How can I enable myself to continue doing business, making money, no matter where you're at? And that's kind of my approach, is to make sure, okay, all the controls that we had in place, how can we continue to be operationally successful no matter where this endpoint is located, or this workload really technically is located?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I love that term too. Not so much work from home, but work from anywhere. I think that's a great point. We do have some questions. I'd like to open this up right now to Q&A. And James, I'm going to start with you first.
Sure.
The first question that's coming across, and Roy, forgive me if I pronounce your last name incorrectly, but the first question is from Roy Gallilang, who's asking, I think we should coin a phrase, minimal practice rather than best practice. So that being said, what is the minimal we should do as we transition to a home remote workplace?
Good question, Roy. So the minimum, it's going to depend on one thing specifically. Are you working on a personal computer, or are you working on a company device? Either case, the most minimalistic thing that you can do to provide some type of security is a VPN, a home VPN personal. All of my devices, my cell phone, even my TVs, all run off of a VPN solution. And you can get solutions as affordable as $30-40 for a year subscription to one of these organizations. And that'll add a layer of security, because like you said, it's a minimum approach. There's no such thing as a secure device 100%. Most of us in the industry understand layered security. The more things and challenges you put in front of a potential attacker, the less likelihood they are to come after your stuff, because they're going after the low-hanging fruit unless there's a big reward at the end of it. So putting a VPN access in, you can do that in as little as 5 minutes from your device, signing up for a subscription and then activating it. If your router has the potential from whatever wireless provider you have, segment your network, have more than one Wi-Fi connection, and be able to put your work computers on one set of connections, password and everything is different. And you can set different security features for that, and then run your personal devices on something else. The more obstacles that you can put in front, the better it is. So making sure your antivirus software is up to date if you're using your personal computer. If you're using your company computer, checking on a regular basis to make sure that your antivirus software is checking in to get the updates that it should be getting from the corporation, because that also will put you at a potential risk. If you're not getting those updates and something new comes out, you can be susceptible to that even if you're on a work computer. And then it's just best practices. If you're not expecting something from somebody to click on that has an attachment to it or something like that, if nothing else, I mean, we're all working from home, give them a call. Hey, did you send this over to me? Before going to click on it and seeing what it is. Something as simple as that can save yourself and the organization a huge headache and a lot of money down the long run if they were potentially something that was unsafe that you clicked on. So just common sense things will probably be what we need to get through this type of situation.
Wow, what a powerful point, right? I mean, as we move forward and within technology, I love what you just said there, right? It still goes back to some of the basic levels of communication, right? I mean, how critical that still is, even in a modern workplace. So thank you so much for that. Well, the next question I'm asking for you, this is coming from Anthony Morera. Anthony asks, as an information assurance student, I have been intrigued with the use of honeypots and honeynetting. Is that a strategy worthwhile in this new setting?
Absolutely. Big fan of honeypots. I try to do honey accounts for user accounts. As James spoke to, anything I can do to catch a person before they do more malicious actions is better for me. So the idea of the honeypot, if anyone's not familiar, is to put a system on your network, low-hanging fruit, name it something that makes it sound like, you're going to get some PII or some account data, and then hopefully you would catch the attacker with his hand in the honey jar. And so I think it's a brilliant approach to security. I'm a big fan of that. Even for websites, you want to see what the attackers are doing. I mean, it's part of, in my opinion, threat intel, to be able to see, okay, is someone looking directly at me is very different than is somebody just scanning the entire internet. And being able to see how potentially someone is behaving as if they were on your network is just great insight. To even look, and I would recommend, I forgot the gentleman's name, there's projects online where people share what they're seeing on both enterprise networks, and I can't think of one immediately, but if you could find me on LinkedIn, I could share with them. They will literally share what they've been seeing from an attack perspective, and then that way you could tune your defenses. I think it's called HoneyNet project. My memory doesn't serve me, but there's projects like that where people share intelligence based upon the actual attacks they've seen, and putting them into practice in your own organization. I think it's usually it's very easy because there's tons of samples out there, and then you set up your security controls to send you to your SIM or to your analyst and figure out exactly is there something unusual going on my network. And like I said, it's the whole goal is to figure it out more quickly so that they have less time to do damage to whatever it is going on. So I'm a big fan.
Great. Thank you so much for that as well. Let me just quickly check and see. Okay. Well, listen, gentlemen, I just want to take a minute and thank you both of you very much for this wonderful conversation, the insight and the depth that you guys have brought to the audience. I think is remarkable, and we'd love to have you both back one day here soon. And to those out there in the internet and the audience, again, VTech Solution, these issues we address on a daily basis. We specialize in cybersecurity, cloud solutions, and infrastructure. So please, reach out to us in those regards, and we can help you with these issues that these gentlemen have touched on. So again, Will and James, I just want to thank you very much again for being with us today. And we hope to see you guys here again soon.